Minecraft 1.21.2 was released last day. Let's see what has changed for us as modding community. Hello everyone, this is Ali Reza. Welcome to the Mentor Code Lab. Today I will talk about the changes from the blog post. I will come back in another video and I will start updating our mod into the latest version. However, before I start talking about the new version and things that were changed, here is a question that you should ask yourself and we need to answer it. When should we update our mod to a new version? When can we become lazy and ignore a version? Honestly, if you want to cover every game version for players to be able to play with, that's okay. It's time consuming, especially with the new approach that Mojang has, and we will see new releases faster. However, normally players wouldn't jump from one Minecraft version to the latest version that easily, especially if they play modded game, because they are spending time in their work playing the game, developing something. In case of modded gameplays, when a new version comes out, they won't jump the ship until every single mod that they have is updated, and that means a lot later than when the Minecraft itself is being published. If you want to update your mod, you should ask yourself how many mods would be played with my mod side by side in a mod pack. For example, for a mod like REI or JEI or EMI, they are the base mods that everyone else are depending on them. Yes, they may want to update their mod as fast as they can. At the same time, in our case, for example, in my own mod, my mod will change the recipes a lot, and I mean it a lot. Almost every block, every item is changed and they became expensive. There are really not that many mods that would sit side by side with my mod and would make the gameplay fun without breaking the complexity and the hardness of my mod, without breaking the balance. So yes, if I want to release my mod for every version, there is a chance that some people out there may play my mod without that many mods out there, and they may want to jump the ship faster. However, if your mod is something like an enchanting mod, a mod that provides some enchantments, chances are that people will include your mod inside mod packs for magical gameplays or RPG style of gameplay. So yes, they will have to wait until every mod comes out. So you are not in a rush. You have time to update your mod. And if you have a Discord channel, there is a better communication between you and players of your mod. If you saw that many people are asking for a special version, yes, you should cover that version. But if people are not disturbing you, then there is no rush. Also, there is another side to this question. Sometimes the changes are not that big. For example, 1.21.1 has changed a lot for enchantments. But other than that, most of the places where easy fixes, fast fixes, like the identifier thing, you may want to cover it because it won't take too much of your time. Or, on the other hand, you may want to drop it because chances are that people will stay on 1.21 and won't go for the .1 subversion. But think about one thing. If you are dropping a special version because it's easy fix, it's fast fix, and people are not showing interest in that version in the community, then you should think about something. When you won't update your mod for maybe 2 or 3 subversions, and then you want to come back and cover a major version, things will pile up. For example, 1.21.1 had changed identifier. Now 1.21.2, today we will see, has changed the registry of items and blocks. Now, if you pile these things on top of each other and neglect updating your mod, as the gap goes on and becomes wider, the amount of job that you need to do becomes bigger when you want to update your mod, and things may become a little bit of headache. However, if you go forward step by step with the latest versions, you may have to sit back and put half an hour, 1 hour, who knows, to fix the problems, but then you have an updated mod. Even if you don't publish it, you have an updated code that can be released at any time. And if another version comes and changes things, you are ready to just put another half an hour, maybe 1 hour, and get things done. Bottom line is that if the changes are big, you should update your mod, no matter what. Even if you don't want to release for that game version because no one is playing that game version, you still need to update your code because that that huge change will take time for you to compensate for the new changes. If the changes are small, go forward and update your mod as the versions are progressing, because you don't want to keep things piled up. So if you want to make things clear, we should break that question into two different questions. Should I update my code is one question, and should I release my mod to the community is another question. The first question's answer is yes. Every time you get an update, you should sit back and update your code as much as possible, because you don't want to get things piled up. However, the answer to the second question is totally a different story. You should be inside community. You can't be a mod developer that never reads comments from players. You should be between players. You should watch some YouTube videos from players playing modded game versions. You should be between them to hear what they are saying and get feedback from them about a special Minecraft version. And you will understand some people may not like something in a new version. And there was a history that Minecraft was changing so much, so fast. And mod developers, they didn't have time to put inside developing with the same speed. So there was this huge gap between mod developer community and Minecraft latest versions. And people who were playing vanilla, well, they are never playing with modded versions, so we don't care about them. They can have fun with Minecraft. But those who play modded gameplays had to stop, and they were stuck with an older version of Minecraft because mod developers were not able to update as fast as possible. So if you were modding at that time, you would understand, if you were between the community, you would understand that most of the servers, even big and famous servers, were stuck with older version of Minecraft. So why should I update my mod as fast as possible? The answer is you don't need to. However, sometimes a new version comes out and adds something really interesting for the players that catches their eye. They want to play this version of Minecraft because of that or this feature. At those times, if you update your mod faster, especially if you are not dependent on third-party mods, chances are that you will gain new players who will download your mod for the very first time because their competition is dropped down between mod developers. So think about these conditions and then make the decision that you should publish for a new version or not. After this little introduction to decision making for updating cycle, now we can talk about 1.21.2. Remember, as always, the blog post will break things into two sections. One is the things that changed in Fabric, and one is the things that changed in Minecraft. Let's start with Fabric because these are a little bit special. Sometimes they are easy to implement, and sometimes they break backward compatibility, and that is important. Okay, the very first one that we even see below is that developers should use Loom 1.8. This means that in your build.gradle file, you should change the very first line. The very first line should start with 1.8. Previously in 1.21.1 it was 1.7. That's the very first change. Then it says that the loader is changed. That's a versioning. Okay, let's get into Gradle.properties, and you see that the loader version became 0.16 something. And it says that the most important thing inside the loader is that they have bundled with Mixin extras to version 0.4.0. If you are not using Mixin, then it's not important for you. But if you are using Mixin, especially if you are using things from Mixin extra, this is the section that we need to take a look, and we will take a look at that in a few minutes. So the changes will be important for you. The next thing is saying that the Fabric Loader 16.7 is now supporting Java 23. However, we still need to stick to Java 21. Why is that? Well, Java is changing, but Mojang is not updating to the new Java version. We had seen that Mojang had used version 17 for a very long time and just recently switched to 21. So even though that the loader is able to support the new Java versions, Minecraft is not updating to the latest Java versions, so that we have to work with the Java version that Minecraft is coding against. Then you will ask, why did the loader update itself and made himself compatible? This is the policy from Fabric mod developers, and I really love it. They go forward and make themselves ready for whenever the Minecraft jumps the ship and gets ready. For example, if you notice, the gap between Minecraft new version and Fabric update for that version is really small, because as Minecraft is giving you the weekly updates, Fabric team uses those beta versions for weekly updates, update themselves behind the scene on branches, making themselves ready. So when the latest version comes out for Minecraft, they already have been coding for that version for the whole time. And chances are that there needs to be a very little change and they can publish the Fabric version. The same thing is happening for Java version. They are making themselves ready for whenever Minecraft makes the decision to go up in Java version. So if you read this line, don't get confused. Mixin Extras. Mixin Extras has new things. First of all, we have a wrap method which allows wrapping the entire method. Then we have cancelable that allows canceling all the injectors, and namespace parameter for the share annotation that will let you share things between mixins. When we get into mixin, you will understand that using Mixin Extra lets you have much easier time and less problem and better compatibility between versions and everything else. You should really use Mixin Extras if you are doing mixin. Loom 1.8, what did happen there is all internal, better caching. It makes itself again ready for Gradle 9, stuff like that. However, here's the important thing. Because of these changes, they are dropping the multi-project optimization. So if you have a multi-project system, be aware that Fabric is dropping multi-project optimization. I'm not sure if they will add it again or because of the new changes, they can't add it anymore. So we will see in future. However, Loom 1.8 right now does not support multi-project optimization. Now we have Fabric changes. Remember, if there is a breaking change inside Minecraft, well, they are listed down below. These are the things that happen by community for Fabric API. First things first, convention tags, add more tags. This was a pull request that was approved. We can take a look at tags later yourself. Now, crash report has better things for stack trace. That's good. Entity events, we have after damage event. That's a very nice event to have because when you have damaged your entity, you may want to do something. For example, play a special sound or particles or whatever. This was really needed to handle the situations that the entity is not dead and it was damaged and you want to do something right after the damage. Now, item API has changed, modify enchantments and add component map builders extensions. So we have some extensions there. Item group API is changed and added API to control creative inventory screen. I hope that they added something that we had in Forge and we didn't have in Fabric, and that is the ability to set where we should see an item group. Basically in Forge you can say that, hey, I want to see my item group, for example, after the vanilla's build tab or before this tab or that tab. We didn't have this ability, and that is why I had to use a little bit of a hackish way of organizing at least my own tabs using numbers at the start for the identifiers. Now, Loot API is version 3 now. Networking, add Minecraft client server instances to networking context. This will not break anything, but now you will have the Minecraft client and Minecraft server instances from the context. So context.something, for example, get server. We have client configuration connection events dot start now. Add access to client configuration network handler in context. That's a good thing. Object builder. Add an API to add additional supported blocks to block entity types. Okay, render API. Now, render API had changed, and we will take a look at that, especially for entity renderer, and that is from Minecraft itself. However, now we have a shade mode for render API and quad overlays for JOML interface. Resource conditions is changed, resource loader is changed. These may affect few people, honestly. Finally, removed Herobrine and transfer API. Crafter is supported now. Add item variant dot with component changes. This is something that we may need to be aware of, especially if we are transferring items around. Now, breaking changes and dependencies. This is a section that you should always read because it breaks your builds, and it's not related to Minecraft but Fabric. We had a deprecated API, Fabric Render Registries version 1. They removed it finally. In resource conditions, the test method now takes a new argument. Tags can no longer have resource conditions. In resource loader listener keys.tags was removed. Okay, the following deprecations were made since the last blog post, means that new things became deprecated. Content registries for villager interaction registries that register collectible is deprecated now because instead of calling a method, now we can use tags from vanilla and add things to this tag, and that is Minecraft villager.pickup. So whenever you add something to this tag, villager will pick up that item or block. Loot API version 2 is now deprecated because we have the version 3, and networking client configuration connection events.ready was renamed to complete. Okay, now the most important part, Minecraft changes. Although I say it in every update video that I make, but it's really need to be said again. Whenever you see a change being listed under Minecraft section, please don't bother Fabric API team. They have no control over these changes whatsoever. These changes were made by Mojang and Minecraft development team. Fabric API cannot change these behaviors. We have some parameters, server world. Now remember that every now and then we were typecasting our world into server. However, things has changed. It says many methods that must be executed on server side now requires server world to be passed explicitly. Do not cast just to fix a type error. How should we do that? We should wrap the whole logic inside an if statement, and we should say if the world instance of server world, and we make a variable, maybe SW, whatever you name it, and then instead of casting to server world, we should pass in this variable, and this is the correct way. So wherever you were or you need now to cast the world to be server world, instead you should use this code, and this is really important. It says, for example, entity.damage now requires a server world, is therefore only called on the server side. So we don't have a call for entity.damage on client. In addition, on the client side, we have client damage, which is called only on the client side. So basically, they are dissecting the logic between client and server more. And honestly, this is a very good thing. This is really good thing, because if you want to play a particle, for example, on damaging the entity, or playing a sound, I don't know, whatever that is graphical, it should happen client side. And server side doesn't need to have that headache for running and compiling and everything else, processing the logic. So this is a good thing. The thing that will affect every mod developer is this section, block and item settings. Previously, we had this name registry. So we had an identifier of something, and you would see that we would register our blocks like this. We would say registry.register, the type block with identifier name and the block itself. However, things are now changed. Why? In previous versions, we had this getName method in blocks and items, and Minecraft was internally using the string that we were producing for the key to put it as the name. And I think I covered that in one video that when I was talking about the command. Basically, what Minecraft was doing is that it was replacing underlines with the spaces, and then would make each word start with capital letters. However, this is changed now. Basically, now we have a dedicated text for the getName. Minecraft 1.21.2 uses registry keys to pre-compute certain block or item settings. This allows referencing them in default components. For example, rather than computing a default name based on an item's registry key inside getName method, if item underline name component is not present, every time now contains the item name component. What does it mean? Previously, if we didn't have this item name, it would use the registry key. However, now each item has this item name all the time. So basically, when we are registering an item, we have to handle this situation. Because of this, you must manually set the registry key in settings, and if we fail, we get a null pointer exception. Before we go forward, let's take a look at this. If you recall, as I showed you previously, when we were registering a block or registering an item, we were doing it in a single line call. We had to use this identifier once. However, if you now take a look at the changes, you see that they are putting that identifier in a variable because we have to use it for a key. And this key is now being used in two places, as you see. One is settings and one is the registry. So if you want to make this in line, basically instead of this settings section, you have make this whole thing in line and then use identifier.of or I don't know, mod identifier, whatever, in two places, one here and one here. I prefer to have a simpler code to read. So in the next video, when I'm updating my code, you will see that we will come back, and instead of using this single line call, we will make it like the example provided because this is really easier to read the code. Make sure to call the item.settings use block prefix translation key for block items. This is critical. You don't need to call it on normal items. However, for block items, you need to provide this method call so that it can handle the translation key format properly. Okay, this change for items and blocks is affecting the, of course, item names, item models, block models, and block loot tables. What does this section mean? If you are using DataGen, you need to recreate your DataGen so that if there is any change, it will produce the new correct JSON files for you. If you are one of those people who provide the JSONs yourself for whatever reason, then you should be aware of the sections that you need to go and check your JSON files. Items, item models, block models, and block loot table JSON files are the things that is being changed because of these changes that happened inside Minecraft. Honestly, I don't see why you shouldn't use DataGen even if you have a single block or a single item in your mod. I highly suggest that you always use DataGen because when things like this happens, it makes your life much easier. We have more changes on block. Now block get loot table key now returns optional registry key. And if you don't have a loot table, it's returning optional instead of Minecraft empty that was the previous behavior. Now you remember that in previous version fabric block settings was deprecated. It's now being completely removed, and of course we already had changed this little change that we are using abstract block.settings, so we don't need to worry about that one. This is an interesting one. It makes much more sense now the way we register a fuel item. Previously we had this fuel registry instance.add and we would add some item. Now we can do it in a different way, calling an event and registering ourselves on an event, and that is fuel registry events.build.register. Then we say builder.add the item with the fuel time. Now you notice that instead of providing a number, we are using this. Using this code, it lets us have a ratio instead of a dedicated number. Now the base melt time is 200 ticks or 10 seconds. Keep that in mind if you had any values, especially if it can be calculating using math from 200, then use this system, multiplier or divisions. If it can't, for example, if you have something like 13, then use the number instead of this calculation. Entities. We have few changes in entities. Entity type received a registry key similar to block and item. So if you are registering your entities, you need to be aware that now you have to use keys every now and then in few different places. And one thing is removed from Fabric API. We had a no argument version, entity type.builder build. This is removed. Okay, so it was injected by Fabric entity type builder and now it's removed. This is the new code that you should use. We had an old game mechanic that is being used in a new way right now. The old mechanic was to convert the villager to zombie villager and back, basically mob conversion. And now we have new mechanics on top of it that when we put the potions on top of mobs and they die, different things can happen. Sometimes they change into another entity. Or for example, when a big slime dies, it spawns smaller entities. So this mob conversion was overhauled. The exact behavior of conversion is now handled by methods implemented by values of entity conversion type enum. And when we are using mob entity convert to method, a new thing, entity conversion context, is now being required. Also, this context is passed to Fabric API's event server living entity events mob conversion. If you are using this event, you should be aware that there is a new context there. When we are spawning a new entity, now we need to add a reason for the spawning. For example, before we had this entity pig equals entity type.pig.create in the world. Now we need to produce the reason it is being created in the world. For example, we are spawning the pig because we used an item. I don't know what is the use case for this in vanilla, but there should be a good reason to have something like this being added into game. The prefix of attributes in entity attributes like generic is being removed. So previously, Minecraft had something like this: public static final registry entity attribute generic attack knockback, both in the variable name and in the key. We had this generic section. It is being dropped by Minecraft. So now it becomes attack knockback. And you see that the key generic dot is not presented anymore. It starts with attack itself. Data generation. Again, this will affect most of the mod developers. A recipe provider must now override get recipe generator instead of generate method call directly. In other words, we had this public void generate recipe exporter offer plank recipe 2, for example. This is a custom recipe, by the way. Exporter, simple block, and something else. Now we need to, first of all, instead of being public, we need to start with a protected recipe generator get recipe generator method that returns a new recipe generator class, and inside that class we need to override the generate and do the same code inside there. God, this made things complicated, and I'm not sure for whatever reason. That's the new thing. So if you had this, you just keep that and copy paste this section on top of it. Okay, action result. This is an interesting one, and it makes totally sense. Previously, we had few different action results. We had action result, item action result, and typed action result. Finally, Mojang made the decision that we should have one action result and use that everywhere. So basically, now we don't have any typed action result or item action result. We just have one action result, and the behavior is the same, just remove two extra things. One important section of it is that if you are using item stack and when you are changing the item stack, for example, it says that we have the item stack in the hand, and if it's more than 16 items in that stack and we are using the stack, take note, it makes a new stack of a new item stack and it wants to replace it in the hand. So it says return action result dot success, but now it calls something else with new hand stack, new stack. This is how you change the item stack in hand by code if you want to remove something and add something. Let's say that, for example, I have, I don't know, a mob drop, and I want to change the item into something else if I shift right click. So I comes to use and I check if the player is sneaking. If that's okay, then I want to remove the previous item from the hand, add a new item in the hand, and this is how we do that. We make the new item and we return the success with hand stack change, with new hand stack, and put the new stack in the hand, and that's important. However, if you are not changing the item type, then you don't need to call this. As it says, if the item stack instance is the same, remember the count is not important here, the type is important. If we are still using the same instance type, then we don't need to call this with new item stack, and we just use action result.success, for example. Okay, we have changed these, and anywhere that we had this item action result or type action result, now we use action result. So for example, it says use item callback, had typed action result item stack, now it returns action result instead of that. Item components, it's especially related to Elytra. Elytra behavior is now controlled by a new component called Minecraft glider. So fabric Elytra item was removed because it's not needed anymore, and you should use this glider for your own Elytra item types. Block entities, again, something that will change many people's lives, is that a little change was made that lets you add all supported blocks to block entities. For example, a mod with a new sign block must add the block to block entity type dot sign. Pay attention, it's not a tag, it's a type. So if you have a new block, you need to add it properly to entity tags if it's needed. In Minecraft 1.21.2, block entity types are no longer constructed upon builders. Therefore, fabric block entity type dot builder was removed, and fabric block entity type builder is no longer deprecated. Okay, registries. Registry now implements registry entry lookup. Some name changes here and there. For example, to query a registry entry from registry key, we use get optional or get or throw. So we had this get entry, for example. Now we have get optional. We had entry of, we get or throw now. Get or throw became get value or throw. Get or empty now became get optional value. Get entry list now became get optional. And there are similar more name changes. You can read them. This section again affects those people who have custom entity renderers, because previously we would directly jump into the render method, and the render method was referencing the entity itself, and everything that we wanted to read from the entity was basically available for us to read from the entity itself. This was working working, but the new thing that Mojang had implemented again makes sense. Honestly, I like it because it reduces the overhead. The problem was that if you had a very busy entity class with lots of logic, when you would go into the renderer section of entity rendering, normally you wouldn't want to get access to all of these mumbo jumbo headache of entity logic. All you needed was to be able to read some values to use them, or I don't know, maybe set some values. So Mojang has changed the things now. He created a new intermediate type that sits between the entity and the renderer to reduce this boilerplate overhead during rendering time. This can help reduce the render time and lag and increase the frame rate, maybe a lot, who knows? It depends on how people use the renderer system. So what we have to do now is 3 steps. First step, we have to create the render state. The render state is the new thing that sits between the entity and the rendering system. After we create the render state to identify what the state is, we have to update the render state. Here, if our entity, for example, has a boolean is saddled, we need to pass this is saddled from entity into the state. This concept is really close to deep copy. However, it's not a deep copy because we are dropping lots of things from entity, but we are taking the things that we want from the entity and we are putting them inside the state. Finally, when we go into the render, take note, we don't have entity anymore. Instead, we have the state. If we want to read something, we read it from the state. This makes things a little bit complex in some really special cases. For example, if you want to set something on entity from renderer, I don't know why you should do that, but if you want to do that, then this makes things a little bit more complex. However, in most cases, honestly, I don't see a problem there and should be fine. It looks like a little bit of extra steps, but these few extra steps has big impact on the game and rendering in the profiler, and I think really rendering should become better now using this approach, especially as I said, if you have busy entities out there. Shaders are changed. I'm not diving into it, but if you are a shader programmer, then this section is for you. Recipes are changed and it was reworked. So recipes are now identified using registry key, the wildcard that extends recipe, not the identifier. Recipe and the recipe ID is now server side only. Instead, the client is receiving the recipe display entry, and the recipes are identified using an integer on the client. Ingredient placement controls the placement of ingredients on crafting table, and recipe matcher handles recipe matching. Ingredients is now internally a list of items, not item stacks. This is something internal, and unless you have access wideners, it won't affect you. In Fabric API, custom ingredient serializer get codec allow empty parameter was removed. Empty now always disallowed. So on this method call on this class, you can't allow empties anymore. Okay, biomes. Water cave carvers were removed. In Fabric Biome API, modifications made because of this, and add carver and remove carver no longer takes generation step.carver. Profiler, the shared profiler accessed using profilers.get. Loot tables. Loot tables.empty was removed. The game uses optional now. Some loot context related logics are now shared with recipes. Because of that, we have name changes. Loot context parameter changed to context parameter, and loot context type is now context type. Finally, we have some changes inside Yarn. These are just some find and replace name changes. Model transformation mode is now inside a new namespace. Realms loading widget is now called loading widget and sits inside a new location. Several brain and test related names are changed. You can take a look at the list here. Registry lookup future is now called registry future. Codex.non-negative int, we have an underline between the non and negative now. Quaternion f vector 3f now has an underline between quaternion and f. Vector and 3f makes sense. Screen.init tab navigation is renamed to refresh widget positions. Component map IMPL is renamed to merge component map. Container component modifier.create is renamed to apply. Item stack encode is now renamed to NBT. Okay, these are all the changes that happened inside 1.21.2. Finally, at the end of the video, we will talk about something and wrap things up. There are lots of changes. Some of them are easy to implement. Some of them may need you to sit back and find and replace things here and there. For example, for me, most of these are not happening, so I can neglect them. When you have an update with these many changes, you should start updating your mod as fast as possible. However, if there are some dependencies, you should wait for those dependencies first. In the next video, we will start updating my mod. However, remember, these videos are coming faster than the list of videos waiting to be published because I'm ahead of YouTube for at least 2 or 3 months. So I recorded the videos, I edited the videos, I uploaded the videos, and they are waiting to be published. So whenever you see this code, it doesn't make sense to you right now because you wouldn't recognize this class registers and you wouldn't recognize any one of these helper calls inside registers. Basically, this is a code refactor that happened and I talked about it in another video. So just ignore something like this and be aware that I'm publishing this updating video faster than the ones that are waiting to be published. Also, I will not number this video with the current sequence because the latest video that was published on the channel is number 34. However, I uploaded up to 42 right now. So this video that you are watching will be numbered 43 and the next one will be numbered 44. So don't be confused. I'm just publishing these two videos faster than the queue, but in the playlist later when the videos are published, I will replace them in a correct place. If you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button and turn on that bell so that when I publish a new video, you will get informed. Have fun everyone. Bye.